Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're continuing on our pandemic projects, and by projects, I mean projects. I have a whole set of projects here. Ron, one of our viewers, sent me several of these reels, and I thought I would take you through this one because it's a beautiful piece of machinery. It is also a quite a thing to just go and repair. So these are working fine. They're a little noisy. Sounds like the bearings, for the most part, just need some oil. And I'll show you how to take it apart. So it's the Daiwa Sealine. It's the Sealine Lever Drag 32. And this is quite a thing. If you have one of these and you've been thinking about tuning it up, I would recommend that you get a lot of patience. You maintain a sense of humor. You go grab a cup of coffee and you think about it, because this is probably not the one. If you haven't worked on these reels, this is not the one to start with. There are a couple of those little tricky parts in here that just take time and patience and understanding. So we'll try and go through those as we work through this reel. I'll show you how it's made. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the technology behind the lever drag system, and we'll show you how to get this one back fishing again. So before we start, I have a parts tray. It's just the bottom of the milk jug. Actually, I have two of them. I kind of separate it when I get a reel like this. It's got several moving parts to it. I have a protective glove on my hand to keep the stuff off of them, and have a couple of different levels of screwdrivers and wrenches and things like that. So we're going to start by removing the external parts, which is kind of what I do. And the first thing I'm going to do is take off this 2-speed knob adjuster here. That's going to enable me to remove the handle. Of all places, the handle nut also acts as the collar for the speed adjuster. So I'll take that off. The screws generally just sit in there. I'm going to have to knock them off later to do that, but you'll notice you have the indented for the nut cap as well as a holder. That's going to go into one of my parts trays. And we have a nut here that's holding the handle on. It's a 14mm nut, so we'll just unscrew that. And that's not on very hard, but it's on. And the nut has the plunger for the speed adjuster. I'm going to put that right into the collar so I know where that goes. And before we get too much further down the line, just wanted to show you that those schematics are available. So go find the schematic online for the Sealine lever drag if that's what you're working on. It'll show you a burst diagram. It shows you there's quite a few pieces and parts in there. And if you need any of those pieces and parts, it shows you the part numbers to do. It's always a good idea when you're taking on what could be a complicated project to do that. Grab your favorite beverage and read it over and make sure that you understand what it is that you expect to see as you remove pieces and parts. This is the collar. Now, even though this looks like a nut, it's got two flat sides on it, it's not. Leave it alone. It does not need to be removed. It's actually the collar that's holding the gear, and when we take the gear side plate off, we'll push that gear through. All right, next up then, we'll remove the free lever. Again, you need a kind of a variety of screwdrivers. In this case, get a thick bladed screwdriver. This isn't much to this one. It's the preset adjuster. It's a little cap, it unscrews. Again, I'm putting those external pieces there. And then we have what I'll call one of those oh darn parts. Let's see if I can. You want to back this off as much as you can, and as hard to see as it's going to be, there's a C-clip right here that attaches to the shaft of the spool. That C-clip has got to be removed in order to complete the removal process of this and free the spool. This is not an easy task. This is one of the first ones I'd say if you're doing this reel for the first time. You have to be very cautious about what you're doing. Among other things, this C-clip can spring, and then you'll be ordering one of those parts we were talking about over there before. So I use a series of picks. I don't know the tool, if there is a tool for this, but you got to do a couple of different things here. And it's not easy in any regard. And it's not unusual to find that this clip goes across the room, on the floor. Oh darn. Hence the oh darn part. But if you stay with it, I'm trying to grab the two tabs on each side. I've kind of partially got it at the moment, but not fully. And it's hard because you're kind of working a little blind here. But eventually, you'll see now that I have that out. And now I gotta just finish this by getting it the rest of the way out without losing it. It's a small piece, but it's integral to the assembly. And if you lose that part, well, I called Daiwa the other day on a separate issue, and I was told that because of the pandemic, Daiwa was 6 to 8 weeks behind shipping pieces and parts. So if you lose that part, this one will be on your bench for about 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, that's going in there. And now I can complete the rest of this. I'm going to take the 4 screws off that hold the lever system on. Now there's 2 different sets here. There's the stop sets, which are kind of typical of this, of a lever drag. The one is for the free spool side, and then the others are tapered screws. And when I get these off, I'll show you that there's a taper inset, but that leads me to a couple of things here while we're doing this. The first thing is take pictures along the way. You got the schematic. That's going to give you a kind of an internal picture, but not only do you want to do that, you want to use your camera, use your cell phone, use a video, use something. But you're just taking so many pieces and parts off here that it would be prudent to take pictures so that if you get stuck, let's say you had to put this reel down for 8 weeks to go get pieces and parts, you can come back and refer to the pictures you took. Now there are two other parts distributors that Daiwa gave me. That's you need to know. One of them is called Platinum Parts. They're out of Tampa, Florida. They have a stock of Daiwa parts, and you also have Southwestern Parts. I believe they're out of Dallas. That also have parts available. So if you get stuck with that piece, try those guys. All right, this whole thing should come off now. We should be able to. Oh, probably screwed that down the wrong way. Should be able to remove your screw preset and your lever drag handle. And here's what I was talking about before. When you go to reinstall, you'll notice 2 of these have the bevels in them. That's for the small screws. And 2 of them have the circle insets. That's for your stops if you've kind of lost track of that. Okay, that's the last ones that I'm going to put into my exterior parts, except for the screws that go on the outside. There's 6 screws here, and I would recommend using a handheld screwdriver for these. If these get salted up, now I understand these are fishing in Lake Tahoe, so there's less of a chance that they're all salted up there. But if you get junk and then you go and try and use a mechanical screwdriver, you could get in trouble by breaking these off or stripping them, and then you're going to have more of a problem. This one by itself is a little stubborn here. I'm just going to put some WD-40. I got it started. I'll come back to that one. But use the screwdrivers, and use the screwdrivers that fit properly. It's don't go with a blade that's too small for the inset. That just is kind of inviting the screw to strip. And some of these have the dual. You saw me take a flat-bladed screwdriver to the other side there. Some of these do have the through slice to them, so you can get a flat-bladed screwdriver in there if you need to. So whatever feels most comfortable in your hand, that's what I would recommend doing. I'm actually going to use, try that flat-bladed screwdriver here. That's got a nice fit to it, so we should be able to get this out with the WD-40 now. Any penetrating oil does. Doesn't have to be the WD-40 brand, but that just puts a little bit extra lubrication into those tight spots and helps with the removal without stripping anything off there. So while we're doing this, this is in the middle of the pandemic, and every day it seems like we get some good news, then we follow it by, but be careful, we're going to get a resurgence of this stuff. Please take care, and if you are a first responder, this is my daily shout out to you. Thank you so much for everything that it is that you do to keep us safe and to restore us to health if we are one of those that does have the virus. Thank you for all you do. We appreciate it. I'm sure we'd be in a whole lot worse situation if it wasn't for your efforts, and they truly are appreciated. All right, the last two are long screws. They're holding this harness in. So I'm going to take these out. These happen to be flat-bladed screws as well. I think we're through the screw part of this. We're just kind of stuck in a case now. I guess maybe not. So the first one of the O'Darn parts is that little C-clip, and then we have a series of pins as well that are going to be holding this spool shaft in. So you just want to be aware of that. We should be able to get this off now. Those screws seem loose, just kind of stuck in the case there. I guess they're still in there. And be patient. That's what I said. Bring a sense of humor. If you're doing this real, bring a sense of humor. But more importantly, bring a sense of patience. This is not... I don't understand why I'm having some difficulty here, but I am. In terms of getting these the rest of the way out. Doesn't seem like there's dirt or anything, it just seems like they're spinning in place. Just long screws. All right, just a little bit. There we go. All right, so here's a back end look. Now you have screws on the back. You don't have to take this back plate off. You have a bearing. You have a big click ring. You have the click mechanism for the trolling. And this one's clean in the back here. There's not really anything built up. I'm just going to use a little cotton swab. There's a little bit of grease on the click ring. That's certainly not going to cause anybody a problem. There's a bearing. I want to test the bearing to make sure that it's working well. And like I said, we heard a little bit of noise there when we started this, so let's go ahead and flood that bearing with oil. I'm using a fishing reel oil. It's Real-X. It's an aftermarket synthetic. But flood it if you haven't had it used in some time. Make sure that it gets a good drink of water. That's going to just go sit on itself over here. All right, we said once you remove that collar pin here, and now you can see the groove where that little C-clip was riding, now that we have the assembly off. Let me get these out of here. Once you get that assembly off there, you can notice how that groove is set up. And then we can remove the inner workings of this. Before I get too much further, I'm just looking for that the harness lug. Well, oh, so I'm looking for the harness lug and it's on there. This usually falls out, but it's on the assembly. That's a good thing. All right, So we got two things. We've got the gearing assembly, which we'll show you how to go do, and we have the spool with the drag assembly. That's why these things get a little bit more complicated. There's a lot going on with these reels, and that's why a lot of folks don't even offer to service these. Let's do the gears first. First of all, you'll notice this is an anti-reverse dog up here. We'll show you how to reload that one, but just kind of leave it alone. But notice how that goes, and you don't have to pull these screws. If you do and this thing pops, notice that this spring comes, wraps around the post, and ties in on the bottom of this dog. So if you find yourself having taken that off, that's the orientation of it. And I can't tell you how many times I get questions about the took an anti-reverse off and I can't get it to work again. Well, most of the time it's those types of screw setups there. All right, this looks like it has the original factory purple grease. I don't use that grease. I use Penn Precision Reel Grease, which is fine. The operative word here is to make sure that you're using fishing reel grease, and you'll be okay. This mount here serves a dual purpose. This mount has a bearing in it. There's 3 or 4 or 5 bearings here. So we're going to go ahead and get that out of the way. It also has 2 studs here, so it may be a little effort to get them off the studs. There's a bearing here on the collar for the gears themselves. There's a bearing on this side of the reel, and there's also the bearing that you saw in the lever. All right, the 4 of those go in, and sometimes this comes off easy, and sometimes it doesn't. So you can gently pry. The only thing that's stuck at the moment here, there you go. So we've got the casing off, or the bracket. Don't pry anything hard. I mean, a little bit of a pry is fine. In this case, didn't need it. Understand that there are studs there. Here's a bearing. That's the top of the gear stack is a bearing. I'm going to just wipe the old grease off of that. And again, we had bearing noise when we were listening with the spool. Now this wouldn't be the spool bearing that would be noisy, but I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to load it with oil. I'm just going to sit it. Actually, I'm going to put it right back into the carrier because that's where that goes. I'm just going to flood it and let it just kind of work its way in as it sits there. Then we should be able to pull the gears off. And this is your whole gear assembly here. Just so we can clean the older stuff and refresh. So I'm going to wipe down that grease there. That'll get greased when we reinstall. So wipe down the grease on that, and I'm going to flood that with the grease, the oil again. And again, I just want to make sure, I'm going to use my finger just to make sure that that bearing is turning nicely, which it is. So we have the inner part of the case is clean. Now we've got the assembly here, and this is how the assembly goes. So this is front of the gear. This little piece is the stud end on the back of the gear. And there's just the old or the original grease, which by now has gotten dry and dirty, and work all of that out of there. And then on the back end, you'll notice that there's a Teflon washer. That Teflon washer is going to fit perfectly over that circle there. So just clean it up and put it there if you like for the reassembly. You don't have to do anything with plastic or Teflon washers. Those things self-lubricate. And while I'm doing that, I'm noticing that there's a little bit of some old grease in that little channel there. So let's get that out of there as well. Clean up the shaft. These are nice stainless parts. So there's no rust or anything, but just get the old grease off of there. We're going to load that up with new grease. If you needed to replace this collar, there's an E-clip here that you would remove to do that. There's no reason here at the moment to need to do that. Or we're just going to complete the older part. That's a little stud that's going to go in here, the ball bearing. That's going to hold the assembly in place. Okay, we're going to use Pen Precision Real Grease for this. And we're just going to make sure that everything gets greased up nicely. This is the front end of the assembly. This is the back end. I clean the other piece. So a lot of with this maintenance of this reel is about cleaning, getting the old dirt out, oiling and lubing so that it works nicely again. Okay. So let's just do that then. We're going to make sure that the inside track here gets the grease. Also get some grease into the teeth here. Alright, that goes on next then. It's going to come on this way. We have that, and then we have this little ball bearing here. Rides like that. Then we're going to lube up the back end of this. Get some grease into the teeth of the big gear. And we will reload into the case. So that's how your main gear goes. A little bit onto the face again. This is one you really can't over-grease too much. Okay, that's that set. So now we know what comes next. Next up then is the carrier with the bearing in it. And we've already oiled that bearing. I'm going to turn that side. We can actually, before I do that, let's just put a little bit of grease onto the shaft there. Turn this over. Now this has got to go on square. There's tight tolerances to this, so make sure you're going down even on both sides as you do this. It's just something you learn from experience. And as we were saying before about losing that that anti-reverse mechanism we just did. So I'll show you how to put that back in. And we've got the 4 screws here to set. So this is one of those things, take your time. This isn't the shortest video I've ever done. It's one of these that you just need a lot of patience on, but you're rewarded in the end by having a reel that's ready to go and not worrying about it when you get out there fishing. Okay, got that set. We got that little stud. I got to just figure out which side the stud came from. Came from this side, I believe. Yep, came from that side. Alright, so we're going to put the tag end under. Guess we have to get this started. So you load it like this, hooks that corner, you bring it in, grab the stud and center it. There we go. So we got it back. It just takes time and takes patience. Doesn't normally happen, but occasionally it does. Okay, there's two main gears, or there's two gears on here. There's the gear that's going to drive each speed. This one's got a square on the back of it. This one's got the main surface to it. I want to just take care of them just like we did with the others. So let's get the old grease off of there. Same thing with this. Go back to our greasing. Get the gears nice and greased up. That square is going to fit in the channel of this one. So that it goes like that. Oops. And again, get some grease into the teeth too. Now, to set this on the anti-reverse dogs, you want to pull that anti-reverse dog over to the side. I'm going to use a pin for that. We're going to load in you have to mesh two gears here. You have to mesh the lower and the upper. Just like that. So now we're properly meshed. And you'll see the anti-reverse dog is up top here. We have both gears are engaged here. And we have it all nice and looped up. So this is your side plate assembly and how that was to be completed. If you're looking for a cup of coffee, this is probably a good time to go get it. Pause the video. We'll get on to the spool. The spool holds the drag washer assembly here. It's got a couple of bearings in it, and we're going to show you how to take this off. If you have it off, we're going to show you how to put it back together again if you lost your way, and hopefully we'll get this one back in a moment or two to fish. Okay, let's start here. There's a pin and a series of tension washers, followed by a collar, followed by a bearing. Again, if you had any question about what that was, I'm just spinning this now. I am hearing a little bit of bearing noise, so we'll make sure that that goes away. So let's start with pushing down on the tension washers so that you can push out the pin. This is not a hard pin to push out. I'm actually going to grab a little screwdriver. This could be another oh darn moment. So I'm going to grab the pliers to pull that pin out. This is the pin that goes through the axle shaft to hold the tension washers on. Then we have a series of tension washers. Now these are concave. They're not flat washers. Just pay attention to how they were on there. You do that to increase the sensitivity of the drag assembly, and unless it's giving you problems and you want to change that, leave them as they are from the factory, and that's the way they came from the factory, nested. I'm going to just put those right in front of me here on the table. Here's your collar. And then the next part up here is a bearing and a free-floating axle now. So you don't have to do anything with the bearing other than oil it at this part unless it was stuck. So let's go over to the back end now. There's 4 screws holding on a bunch of springs, which is another area where you probably don't want to venture if you haven't done this before, or at least be very, very careful when you do, because the springs are what's responsible for sending this back into free spool. It's going to push the drag washers away from the pressure plate, and if you lose the springs, you lose that tension. There's 4 screws on here. I'm just getting them all started equally in terms of breaking them. They do have a little bit of Loctite on them from the factory. Okay, so I got them all loose. Now I'm going to just take them out. Again, small parts seem to be the bugaboo with any reel. These are small screws, so I'm going to put them right into the tray. And that'll help us find them later. So the only thing I don't have in the tray right now is the collar and the tension washers. They're right in front of me. I'm keeping an eye on them, but I'm also keeping them away from where my hands are moving. I don't want to get anywhere close to knocking them somewhere. One, because I'm holding the sequence on the tension washers, and two, if they start spreading out, you're going to be having a lot of time searching for them. Alright, here's the last of them. I'm keeping the tension onto the plate here. That's going to remove the tension on the plate. It's going to push up the whole assembly for our drag washers and our collar. And you'll notice that you got springs here. This is a good place to take pictures if you haven't been taking pictures along the way, because that will show you the location of those in case you get lost along the way, or in case you dump the reel backwards somewhere. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to sit it this way now that it's flat, put that in the back here, and go on to service the balance of this. So we have the pressure plate, we have a collar that goes on, we have a bearing that sits below, there's a bearing above as well. So it sits like this, and there's a shim washer in there as well. Sits like that. There's a shim washer underneath that holds to the collar here. Here's your one of these wonderful pieces here. This is another pin driven that's holding your discs in place. So I'm going to grab that pin with my needle nose pliers if I can. I can push that out, we'll see. There's also a C-clip holding this in, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull the pin without the C-clip first. I can't, but this is the second of those silly little C-clips that we started this thing with on the other side. Try and do this by hand strength first. Making a little bit of progress. I'm going to use my pin. And again, be careful here. This thing can fly, and if it flies, well, you just have one of those moments. That flew, but it bounced off my hand. Well, I'm not a lucky guy today. All right, that comes off. Then you should be able to remove this collar. Notice that the collar has the indentation in it for the pin. Then you should be able to push the pin through. I'm putting these right into that putting right into the holder for the gear assembly there. Here's drag plate number one. The drag plate is fine. It's got a little bit of grease on it, which it should. Here's two tension washers on the back. So lay these out the way they're coming off, and that way you'll know how it is to go back on. There you go. So this is your assembly. All right, the drag washers are okay. They have some grease on it, so I'm going to go put drag grease back on that. I'm going to use Cal's Universal Drag Grease for that. I'm just going to grab a paper towel just as a spread for this. Just put a little bit on there and rub it in. And do that on both. And that assembly there that we just did, good place to take pictures. If you found yourself doing just what I did here and all of a sudden you're at a loss, well, that's where you go back to the pictures, or you go to the schematic. It'll show you the same. I'm wiping off the excess now. The excess grease isn't there to do anything other than to keep these flexible and minimize wear. So that's what we just did. Okay, so we have our shaft. We have the first of the drag washers. We have the spring. We'll clean up the pressure plate. You shouldn't be using abrasives on this. This is kind of a polished plate. So just leave it at that. We have the second of our washers. tension washers. Keep your orientation correct on that. Next, the pin goes in. Then the collar goes in. And everything's kind of floating at the moment. And then we put that fun little C-clip on there. And again, this is one of those aha moments, so please be careful as you go to reset this. Again, it can shoot at any point, and if it shoots, well, you'll be searching for a part somewhere. I guess this is something that only experience can teach you to do, but there you go, that's back in. I used a channel lock pliers to get that done. Alright, next up then we want to service the shaft. We want to get a light coating of grease onto this. There's a collar that this is going to slide on. We saw that before here. We have a bearing shield goes on the bottom. I should have done that before I put the grease on, because it's probably pushing grease down. We have that bearing. I'm going to put oil on. The collar goes next for that whole cylinder. I guess we probably want to put the cylinder in first, because that seems like the diameter. Okay. Cylinder there, it's going to shield the bearing. Yes. There you go. We're going to grab the back end of this, and then we can thread all of this through. And actually, what I'm going to do here is let's just thread it through like this. Kind of a balancing act here. Get your plate lined up with all of the pieces and parts, then come on with your cover. And this one, we've got the 4 screws that are on the outside of this. I like to just get one started, because the gap will help you hold the screw in place. And these are not easy because you got the springs pushing against them. So as soon as you feel it start, just move on to the next one. And those of you that know me know that me and little screws don't get along all the time. So maybe this is time for your second cup of coffee. I do know that this is running long, but this is not an easy reel to service, and speed is everybody's enemy. And when you're going to do these, I'll try and do them fast, try and do them right. Alright, 2 more. I'm just getting them started again. Right now I'm kind of expecting that my battery on my camera is going to go, or the film is going to go, or maybe I'm just going to go and get a cup of coffee. I don't know. Now we're going to go until we hear something tell me that it's off. But I think I have a limit on the timing of these things. Alright, that's the last one that should get started. And once you get it started, do what we usually do, north, south, east, west. Don't go around in a circle, keep the tension the same. Tighten them all down. one more. And we can put the... Well, as I expected, my battery pack just ran. So we're back again. We just did the 2 screws. Let's keep going here. Hopefully there wasn't too much of a break in the video there. Hopefully it was seamless and you didn't even notice. Here's number 3. Here's number 4. This one has got a little bit of dirt on it. I'm just going to make sure that that gets a little bit of WD-40 on the way in. We'll go up top. We'll put the 2 for the harness lug in. We know where it is this time. Before I was looking on the desk for it. We know it hasn't left anywhere. 2 long screws here. Doesn't hurt to get a little bit of the oil on both. That was a flat-bladed screwdriver, so let's change over there. And we're almost at the moment of truth kind of situation here. Coming back down the pike. Alright, so now we want to grab our shoulder and our free spool. The free spool's got a hex nut that it's going to connect to. You always want to get this lip over that carrier. And then remember what we said about these mounting screws here. There's 2 for the free spool. They go in the holes that are not flanged or beveled or whatever the proper word is. And those are the stops. Those are the stops for the full drag and free spool. Most of the over drag wheels have that kind of a setup. There's one on this side. And then we have the 2 small beveled screws, and that's why my parts tray works the way it does. Now, I've got a lot of suggestions from folks, including using plastic bags to store certain segments of the disassembly process. I've heard egg cartons to store them in segments. I'm going to endorse all of those, and laying them out on mats in front of you or in the shop, the way they came off, the way they go on. Whatever works for you, I'm going to endorse. This happens to be what works for me, and as long as it's working for me, I'm going to leave it that way. There's a burring in here. Let's get oil on that. That's also part of our oh darn movement. You want to bring this all the way down now. And I believe this is reverse threaded. Maybe not. Yeah, this is reverse threaded. To put this on, I'm turning this in a okay, so what you need to do here, you'll see you can't get that C-clip on. You need to pull the spool up, pushing the bearing down. This is where you need to take a deep breath, because we got that other little C-clip that we're working with now. And if there's ever a boing moment in this reel, this is it. You want to make sure that this is adjusted fully down. That gives you the most access to the slot. And you do need to make sure that these prongs from this clip are in the slot. If both prongs are not in the slot, this thing will surely fly. I'm going to put my finger over this now. You won't see what I'm doing, but this is the only way I know to, if it does decide it's going to start flying, to keep it from shooting far. And this is just a kind of a strength game. I often wonder how they do this in the factory. I tell myself it can't be this way. But I don't know. What I have it sliding right now. Like I said, there's a couple of different things you're trying to do here. It's a real balancing act. I almost lost it that time. So go get your cup of coffee. We'll be back with the exciting conclusion of this in a moment. This just takes patience. Well, there we go. Wow. Just wow. That's quite an effort. Look at that now. Nice. Nice. All right, handle goes on. Adjuster goes on. $14mm nut. Seems like it's been an hour ago. We took this, let's put this one back on too while we're at it. This little shield. That's another advantage of that clutch tray. You know where to look for stuff. This one has got very tight tolerances, so I like to poke one of those screws out at this point so that I can see the alignment as I try to get the other one. Remember, this has got a nut cap on it on the back side. So this has to be tightened a little bit. And you're just dealing fractionally with this, but it's enough. So I guess we just learned if you're in this position, if that point is pointing to the circle, you pretty much got it. Down one here. So just as we started, we're finishing. Everything's in reverse. Oh, got ahead of myself. There's my parts basket. You get to see me do this again. There's a sleeve hiding in my parts tray there. Got so excited with the exciting conclusion that I forgot to put the sleeve on. There we go. There's your sleeve. Now we can put the handle on. Now we can put the adjuster on. as I mentioned, we learned that if you put that point to the there, we should be able to line up, which we do. So this is why it's worth sending these reels to the factory. I'm not the factory, but if you're trying to do this one yourself, you just saw there's a lot of little steps in this, and this is not an easy task. So be bold, is that the word? If you're going to do it yourself, just understand that there's some pitfalls in this. I think I tried to alert you to them, but they're not necessarily easy. All right, we're in free spool. Look at that. Beautiful equipment. Let's move that up to the brake. First strike. Full strike. Free spool. First strike. Full on. And none of the noise from what we had earlier. Just a nice running wheel. Okay, there it is. That's your Daiwa Sealine SLD 30 2-speed. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you did, please like it and subscribe if you want to see more. And by all means, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay doing what you're supposed to be doing in this pandemic so that we can all emerge from this better. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.